Good evening, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of the Fishing Channel Regional Fishing Reports, where we're going to go to South Carolina for the Inshore Kayak Fishing Report with Chris Tweedy. But before we do that, I have a couple announcements and reminders. As a reminder, everybody who follows the Fishing Channel gets 10% off a purchase of any GI jig. Could be multiple, but you get 10% off your purchase if you go onto the GI Jig website and use the TFC code to get your 10% off. And that is ongoing. That's not a holiday special, and it is for everybody who follows the Fishing Channel. We also have a holiday deal going on with our shirts. I'm wearing the Rock the Bay shirt, one of my favorites. I love them both, but this one I really do like. And Crazy Horse here has the Red Zone shirt on. Very flattering, very nice. Thanks for stepping in. So we're having a bundle deal where we're giving $20 off the package. So you pay $59, you save $20 for this holiday deal. I said we're gonna go past New Year's with this. What do you think, Crazy Horse?
Oh, yeah. New Year's Day.
Okay, so New Year's Day. And as always, we have question of the evening, and tonight's a really cool prize, I think. So you get 20% off any backyard custom fishing rods with Steve Fogel. I have mine. Where's Crazy Horses here? Okay, so this is Grant's. Mine is a little bit different, but very custom. It has Grant's favorite fish on here. Is this your favorite fish? Speckled trout. So very nice. And this is the fast action, medium action. So this is the custom rod that Grant has. I have one of my own, and we've been using it and getting on fish. So so again, question of the evening, 20% off backyard custom rods. Also a reminder on, we have the Fishing Channel Plus as part of our YouTube membership. So for $5.99 a month, you will get, correction, thank you, $5 a month, you will get exclusive content that is not shown anywhere else. So you get your all of your favorite people that come on our show, including Stephen Camboris, Cambo Trout. We have C.L. Marshall, Tom Weaver, and the whole crew that we have on our team that's part of our regional fishing reports, including Eddie Weber, the Sovereign Angler, one of my favorites. So sign on and become a member. Really great content behind the scenes going on there. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Chris Tweedy for the South Carolina Inshore Fishing Report. How are you doing, Chris?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. I'm cold.
Yeah, it's getting cold here, but that's perfect for what we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
I just checked the water temperatures here in Charleston Harbor. The temperature just hit about 65 degrees, which means we're pretty much on the doorstep for our, like, one of our go times in terms of the speckled trout bite.
Ooh,
so
okay.
For like the next month or so, we're going to be looking at a lot of like some of the bigger trout we're able to catch inshore up and down the South Carolina coast.
Awesome.
So that's what we're really getting excited about now. The redfish are starting to move into sort of like their late fall winter pattern where they're schooling up, and we're finding really feisty fish like in the slot range, and then a few over slot fish, but nothing too huge. A lot of bigger fish, like we talked about last time, have moved beyond our reach, but they pretty much like completely moved out at this point, along with like the sharks and things like that.
Yeah.
At least what we care to catch inshore anyway. So we're getting ready and excited for trout season. One of the bigger trout tournaments in South Carolina is about to kick off, at least for kayakers, our Trout for Tots tournament, which our local kayak club, Low Country Kayak Anglers, hosts as a fundraiser for Toys for Tots. So we get some pretty decent trout up in like the 24 to 26 inch range, usually kind of is what you'll need to win it. But I know that's nothing like you guys can get up your way, but for us, that's a really good sized trout. Yeah. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about, I hope tonight, is sort of maybe some question and answer about some of the trout, and then sort of what we're looking at in terms of what's working here in South Carolina.
All right. And that's a great cause, right? The children, very important. You know, I advocate for children all the time on the show. So I really appreciate you, Chris, and all of your efforts to reach the children. We talked about some of the other things that you've done recently.
Yeah. So that, let me hang on one sec. That's not my tournament per se. That's just one that the kayak club I'm involved with has run annually for like the last like 7 or 8 years or so. So yeah, no. That's I don't want anybody to think that that's me. It's a big group effort.
Sure. Yeah.
But anyway, thank you. I appreciate it. I try my best to be as community minded as possible.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you and we stand behind you with all the efforts that you're doing to reach children. And speaking that briefly before we get deeper into the fishing report, because it goes really fast once we start pulling in questions. Chris Tweedy is owner of Topwater Kayak Charters out of South Carolina. And he has been having some really great success getting people on fish, without a doubt. But I would like to read this review, if I may, because I was looking at it and I think it's noteworthy that this gentleman here wrote this 5-star review for you. Chris and Topwater Kayak is amazing. I've done 2 trips now, a 4-hour and an 8-hour. 8-hour trip on a kayak. They must really like hanging out with you to hang out on 8 hours on a kayak.
That was actually, that included two gentlemen that had never kayak fished before. So I actually asked the gentleman who wrote the review, I was like, you sure you want to do this for 8 hours? And he was like, yep, we could do it.
Right on.
They did great. We make it work.
So one with someone who fishes, like you mentioned. So they go on to give you praise about your knowledge. Chris and his team know everything they need to know about fish, the waters, the bait, the bite, and all of it. Hobie kayaks are incredible and they had an amazing time. They say you must check them out. So I just want to mention that because we want to help promote you as well as part of this. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you, you have your phone number listed by your name there on the screen. Yep. How else can they get a hold of you to schedule a kayak guided tour?
So generally, I'm going to have a lot of my most up-to-date information will be on the Facebook page, which is the same as the charter names, the Topwater Kayak Charters. Right now, I'm actually taking a little bit of time between now and Thanksgiving to do a little bit of overhaul on the website in terms of kind of updating stuff. I'm going to probably feature more of like a teaching type charter for the next 2 months or so when the fish are kind of schooled up, and when we can get there, we can work on some presentations in terms of artificials and stuff like that. And then more or less do some like shorter, like 4-hour trips with the winter weather coming, so we can kind of focus on the midday. So and that the website is carolinatopwater.com. So phone number is the easiest way to get a hold of me, by text or just voicemail, whatever, call. If I don't answer, I'm probably out on the water with somebody. So feel free, shoot me a text, leave a message, whatever. But yep, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right up on the screen there.
Awesome. So let's get back into the fishing report. You started talking about speckled trout.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the setup on your rod for the speckled trout?
So most of the time I'm going to use a medium light type rod. I would like a fast action tip on it just so I can maximize the sensitivity as well as like minimize the need to do like an aggressive hook set. I can get most of the work done just moving the last like 18 to 20 inches of the rod rather than forcefully setting the hook. So I'll usually use that, something in like the upper 6 foot to lower 7 foot range. It really just depends on the rod for the length for me. If I find the rod that feels good, I really don't care if it's long or short or whatever. As long, it's all about feel. So 6 like 8 to 7.2 is typically the wheelhouse for me. And then I'm going to usually use a 2500 to 3000, usually a 2500 series reel. And then spool it up. For myself, I'm going to use like 15 to 20 pound 8-strand braid, typically with anything from a 15 to 20 pound test leader. I don't tend to overthink it too much on the line. I mean, I know I have a good friend that throws swivels and 40-pound tests. I have another friend that throws DOA shrimp with a steel leader for trout. And like, our water's too imperfect in terms of the clarity here for it to really truly get that scientific as like you would need to in like the Gulf or something like that. So whatever leader you feel comfortable throwing and can get the job done is the right answer for you. So for me, that's like a 2,500 with 15-pound test, and typically a 15 to 20-pound leader. I feel like the heavier line gets stiff, especially as the temperature drops a bit. But like I said, I don't like overthink the fluorocarbon. I'm just buying like 300-yard spool of mono from Walmart for $3 and calling it a day. So as far as what I'm throwing, my confidence is always going to be like a finesse shroom type setup with a paddle tail. Z-Man is my go-to. The jig head, I like a denser jig head that keeps the bait upright nicely. So I'll bounce around on what I use. Sometimes I get picky. Sometimes I'll just start playing with what can I get away with cheaply on Amazon. So at the end of the day, if you feel comfortable about what you're throwing as far as the jig, it's going to work. The issue is the trout aren't always going to be on the bottom. Sometimes they're either the bottom of the top or the middle of the water. So you got to kind of vary what you're throwing a little bit. For the mid column right now, what's working effectively, a lot of people are throwing a popping cork with like a leader with some kind of white. I'm throwing curly tail white grubs. Other folks are throwing like voodoo shrimp. People are throwing DOA. People are throwing even just white paddle tails, just something to keep it in the middle of the column, starting from the top and then fluttering, kind of floating down, working it along the grass line. That approach has been working pretty well. Top water is going to work when the conditions are right. So if there's enough clarity to the water or there's just enough non-clarity to the water, top water is going to kind of be an answer when you can work those like pools along seams along the edges. So if I had to pick like 4 or 5 things to go to, it would be like a skitter walk or a Zare spook style walk the dog for the surface. A Yozuri like crystal shrimp suspending bait to work sort of the middle. A popping cork setup with, again, like your confidence, whether that's a shrimp or curly tail, some gulp, like just something that's going to high contrast against the grass line. So for me, that's typically white. And then on the bottom, I love throwing the jigs. Every once in a while, they'll go with like the flavor of the day. Like right now, a lot of folks are throwing those like Paul Brown lures. A lot of people are throwing jerk baits and things like that. Like I think when you guys came to see me last year, Grant left me with a jerk bait that I've been using occasionally. I need to replace the hooks on it, but that's working well. Like, and again, it's what you're confident throwing. So if you get the bait in front of the fish and they're there, they're going to eat it. So water clarity plays more of a role. And finding it's basically just on the hunt. Or like sometimes the fish will be deeper and orienting to the grass line, but they're like 20 yards off of it and moving in and out as the tide kind of changes the current. So it's like the current under the water that you can't see moving. So sometimes they'll move out and won't be right where you think they are. They're just there, but they're somewhere you're not expecting them to be. So every once in a while, if we're frustrated by a bite, I'm just going to throw random casts at like random spots that seem completely off the wall, just kind of hone it in. But more or less, we're looking for like the oyster beds. We're looking for the down current side of the docks and things like that, places where the trout can hide and hang out and rise and ambush the bait, and using more of the visual side of the predator side of them being more visual than like oriented to scent or whatever. So as far as like live bait goes, live shrimp's going to probably be the ticket at this point. The bigger, the better, especially for the bigger trout. The mullet are more or less starting to move out, diminish. So it'll kind of be like a mud minnow bite coming up soon. But right now, like if you can find the bigger shrimp, it's gonna get it done for sure, no matter what.
That's great. I have a question, but we have questions rolling in. Rodney, when is the best month to book a trip?
So that is a great question, and honestly, the answer is truly going to be what you want to do. Like the fall is all about, from now until honestly all the way through the holidays, and then from like March until about Labor Day, it's going to be a lot of artificial. So if you're trying to like learn how to throw bass style rigs and things like that and lightweight stuff and get it done with artificials, like this is the time of year to learn to do that. The summertime is going to be like a more of an exciting bite where we're using bait and we're waiting on bigger fish. And there's like things like sharks and stuff like that coming along. The springtime's going to come sometimes feature like bull reds. We won't have quite as much things like flounder. So really, honestly, the best thing you can do is call me and talk it over and tell me what you want to do when you're coming to town, and I can steer you in the right direction. Because what you're looking for may be different than anybody like just coming to town for a weekend. So I try to customize these things so folks can do what they're truly looking to do. So we can make it work.
Right on. Rodney has another question. Do you use side imaging to search for fish?
So no, funny thing is, once I started my charter, I kind of put all of my sonar type stuff away. I stopped using it altogether. I wanted to rely more on like using the clues from nature and figuring out the fish more so than having that. I found that to be something that a lot of new people will kind of look and stare at their fish finder because they're looking for an answer that they're not going to find. So for me, it's about looking at the environment, studying the tides, looking for what's attracting the fish and the bait and the birds and things like that, and kind of tying it all together so that you can go most places and not have to cruise around staring at a screen, but like look at the world around you and figure out how to make it work with what the conditions are basically telling you and how to read those.
Exactly. And that is an important skill to have. If I'm ever on Survivor, you are on my team.
Thank you.
We need fish. We need to find them without electronics. So I have a question. You mentioned about using live shrimp. I've seen many different ways on how different captains may hook up a shrimp to a hook. But how do you attach your shrimp to your hooks? Is it through the head? Is it through the tail? And what's the purpose behind that?
So I'll do it two different ways. More often than not, I'm usually going to hook it through the segment right in front of the tail. And I'm going to go through the bottom and out through the top. A lot of times, if I'm going to do that, I either throw the shrimp on the same jig head that I'm using to throw plastics with. If I know that there's fish there and I want to figure out sort of where they're on, say like an oyster bed, I'll throw it at it and fish it like it's a jig head and something's going to smash it eventually. So that's sort of like a high risk, high reward thing where something's typically going to grab it. It could be a bluefish, it could be a crab, it could be a trout, it could be a red, it could be a flounder. So it's more of like a speculative cast. Or if I know that they're deeper in the water column and I don't feel like the customer is going to typically be able to throw like a 4 or 5 foot leader with like a weight on it with the shrimp on the end, they're going to wind up throwing the shrimp one way and everything else a different way. So that's more of sort of a fail-safe rig, but it gets the job done. You also get a few random things like sheep's head and black drum and stuff like that as well. So it can be interesting. Otherwise, I'm going to hook it. I'm going to use smaller, like size 1 type hook, maybe even a little bit smaller than that. And I'm going to typically hook it through the tail so that when I pop it, the hook will kind of drag it so that the front of the shrimp will drift down slower than the back of it will, which I think a little bit more of a natural look.
Yes,
but
strategy.
When I throw in shrimp, I'm typically doing it in a situation where I know it's not going to make it 10 or 15 seconds once it hits the water. So unless I'm trying to control it to drift it into somewhere, on a kayak, I'm a little bit limited in terms of how much shrimp I can keep. So I have to kind of target when I use it and how I use it. So that's a little bit specific. I typically use it like in low tide dock fishing situations where the current's not ripping by and I want to kind of keep a bite active while waiting for like the main bite to kick in, like on the flip on the tide or something like that. So it's usually something I'll do when the bite on artificial slows down, like on the stall, just to keep something going.
Yeah, no, those are all great tips, Chris. Thank you. We have a question for Evans Gone Fishing. Sure. What made you want to be a charter captain?
So that's a great question too. So a combination of things. Primarily, I was a guide for the local Heroes on the Water chapter for a number of years, and I really kind of fell in love with it. And a lot of the people that would come out would be like repeat participants, and they request me and stuff like that. And I just kind of like fell in love with doing it. So I was working at tackle shops, and I was plugged into the fishing industry for quite a while. So I kind of, once the last shop that I worked at closed right before COVID, I decided that I was done working for people. I wanted to give this a shot. So it was through like growing to love doing the guiding through Heroes on the Water that kind of led me to this finally. So
yes, well, we definitely support Heroes on the Water. I've had the pleasure of going out I think twice now, and it's always an amazing experience to connect with people and doing something that everyone could really enjoy. And
yeah, you guys have a really active chapter there. I saw some of the stuff, some of your posts. You guys, that's awesome. You guys are getting involved with that. That's fantastic.
that's great.
Good for you.
So we are at the end of our show.
You serious?
It happened so fast. I had so many other questions. We were talking about other fish. But question of the evening. It looks like we've had two.
Evan or?
Yeah, so Rodney Green
Mhm.
with his questions about the side imaging, searching for fish. And Evan's gone fishing. Why did you become a charter captain?
Okay, so I'm gonna go with the side imaging question, no, mostly because that's more about fishing than me, and like most folks will get to know me through the charter in terms of finding that's how I got to become a captain. Anyway, so can I expand on his question for just a second, or do we have enough time?
Yeah, sure, we have some time.
So I find that when people get into kayak fishing, especially, there's one of two different ways. You're either going to tiptoe in, or you're going to just dive in and go apes like nuts. Just go like you're going to spend like more money on accessories than you spend on your kayak, and then you're going to sell it like 6 months later.
Yep.
And including like side imaging and things like that. So there's a time and a place for the side imaging. And like if I was a professional tournament bass fisherman in a kayak or something like that, that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm fishing is typically like 3 to 4 to 6 feet of water, and it's water that I know, and it's water I fish regularly. So I never found anything on my like down scan or like the sonar that made anything I was doing better, other than like maybe the water temperature and the depth.
Yep.
But like I can use apps at this point to figure out all that stuff out. So the GPS as well, like I can backtrack through various different, like any kind of app will help you, like Navionics or whatever will get you from like point A to B or back to where you came from. So I think a lot of people rely on that as something that they think is going to give them an answer that just isn't going to happen. So like you're never going to see fish, or you're not going to see a school of redfish, and if you do, they're probably not going to bite because they're directly under you. So in like 3 feet of water. So tiptoe into that side imaging in a kayak a little carefully, because make sure you know what you're going to use it for, not just think it's something you need to have. Don't like you can spend that $400 or $500 better on like better gear to fish with or something. So the answers that you're looking for are in nature, and they've been there forever, and they're still there. So take the time to learn what they are, and it makes it a lot easier to go different places to figure out different things. So
yeah, for sure. Grant says preach. No, it's a really great point. We had another guest on the show, Lori Blue Screen, and she speaks pretty much the same thing as you do. She learns the lay of the land just like you do, knows how to use the weather, tides if there are any. She fishes mostly ponds and lakes, but get to know what's going on with the environment and how it impacts the fish. It's a really great skill to have. I hope to glean from you and Lori and learn that skill myself one day soon. But thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
So much in this segment. Thank you. Thanks for everyone who tuned in and on Instagram as well. And I hope you have a great night. Chris, look forward to speaking to you again soon. And everybody, fish on.
Everybody.